Well, I read a letter. I stumbled on, a document from Alton. That's the Association of Telecommunications of Nigeria. Who wrote to the FCCPC and have made arguments. And I've also read arguments made by certain legislators that the regulation in particular is going to stifle innovation. Now, the truth is that's the language that lobbyists use, to stop that bill from getting into action. Because rather than stifle innovation, what that regulation is going to do is to actually promote, innovation and opportunities. Because once you have the market share of these dominant players in the sector, take for instance, as was done in India. So you put it at 30% market share, you cap it at 30% market share. The remaining 70% will then be shared by local fintech organizations who will come into the space, who will create value, who will introduce new products, who will introduce new technology, and that will spur innovation and creativity in the entire market. So the argument that this regulation is going to stifle innovation, I think falls flat on the face of reality and evidence, because the evidence otherwise that it's actually going to spur innovation and create massive opportunities within our local economy. The second argument, obviously, that they have made is that there is some sort of duplication of regulation, which means the same thing that the FCCPC is trying to regulate. Perhaps the CBN is doing that, perhaps the NDIC is doing that. But that for me is neither here nor there. That can be easily ironed out by simply harmonizing those particular issues that you feel are being duplicated across agencies. And that can be easily ironed out by just a simple harmonization, of many of those duplicates, if they exist, because I haven't even seen it exist in anywhere, but assuming without considering that they exist somewhere, then we can easily harmonize them, going forward. But the idea that we shouldn't cap market share, the idea that we should not allow local players to come into the space, the idea that we should not allow data from these big telcos to be shared with credit bureaus, I think is an idea that should be supported by all. And I think it's going to help, this digital economy space to grow and thrive.
All right. There's a growing excitement around, global tech partnerships, but at what cost is the question, right? So how can Nigeria collaborate internationally while still protecting that local innovator, the local guy who's trying to do something genius-wise for the nation and for the continent and perhaps for the world? How does that partnership work? What kind of symmetry do we see this playing?
Well, I don't think you can run away from partnerships, and I think partnerships are necessary, right? We need to partner, we need to collaborate with people across the world. Now, what we must not do when we are partnering and collaborating is to shortchange ourselves as a country, especially in terms of policy making. Now, individual actors, individual businesses or startups can enjoy a certain level of collaborations with people across the entire world. But at a policy level, we must ensure that we put in place policies that, one, ensures that we attract capital into the economy. Two, to put in policies in place that ensures that funding comes into the economy to support, local tech startups. I think that's the most important thing that also happens in many of these countries like Kenya, South Africa, and India. That doesn't happen here, because in those countries, big telcos like Safaricom and in many other countries that I've mentioned actually put together funds to support local tech businesses in those countries, invest in them and expand, their horizon across the country. Use their big infrastructure to carry many of these small businesses into global prominence. And we haven't seen enough of that happen, in the country today. And we'd like to see policies that, creates the environment upon which big telcos, for instance, finds it necessary, to give back to the economy by supporting the growth, innovation, expansion, and globalization of many small tech startups in Nigeria.
So again, it's very insightful what you're saying, and it's good that you're layering it. And one of those questions for me would be, I'm going to ask you straight up. Are you saying for a certain right now that Nigeria's digital economy is losing its way? Is that what you are saying? Have we?
Well,
Is it losing its way, or has it lost its way? Which way, where are we pegging it?
it hasn't lost its way. I think it's being pulled by forces from several directions. But the more we speak up, the more people like you are generous to offer your platforms to have these kinds of conversation, kind of debate. I believe that it would awaken those in the regulatory space to their responsibility
Now,
and ensure.
quickly, I want you to go quickly deeper into that question I just asked. So, if you were asked to design like a rescue plan for Nigeria's digital economy, what 3 steps would you prioritize to restore that coherence, confidence, and then the sovereignty that we're looking at?
But to be honest with you, you'll be promoting me to redundancy. I don't think I have the expertise to provide that one magic bullet. But what I can say is that if we get the current lending regulation bill, and framework into implementation, I believe that it would open up the entire digital economy space to new investments, to new capital, and of course, to new opportunities that will not only create jobs, but also add tremendous value to the economy. The solution is right there on the table. But the problem is that you have big players resisting its implementation, and we must fight on the side of the Nigerian people to ensure that that regulation is implemented so that we can create enormous value for the local economy.
All right. I mean, within the course of this discussion, you've called for digital sovereignty and domestic participation policies and all that. What concrete safeguards are necessary for us to include, from data localization to ownership protection? What are those safeguards that should be included?
Well, I mean, some of the safeguards, especially because it had already been settled when the Nigerian Startup Act was designed. But some of the safeguards that should be included is especially when the fortune of many of these organizations are generated and made from Nigeria and the Nigerian people. We should ensure at all times that however little the share or the market share is, we must ensure local participation of local talent, of local organizations, of local startup. I mean, I listened to the president, was it 3-4 days ago, talk about what was the word he used to describe it? The Nigeria First policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We must have Nigeria First policy across board, because that's the only way we're going to be able to create jobs for the millions of teeming youths across the country. And that's the only way we're going to be able to grow the economy. So my one recommendation will be that we have the outlook of that Nigeria First and ensure that, while there's not enough to protect as market, we must also ensure and promote policies, that stimulates collaboration, but also ensures that local tech startups can participate, in already existing value chain in the economy.
All right. In coming to a conclusion on this discussion as we about rounding up, you see, critics will argue that sovereignty sounds sometimes like perfectionism, or protectionism, whichever, not perfectionism. It will be protectionism, and what are they trying to protect? How do we protect national interest without scaring off the global investors? That would be one of very important questions. And the next one would then be, what kind of political courage do we need to make all this we've talked about to come into fruition? It's very important that the political will meets, the strategies that we're talking about.
I think you've asked a very important question. How do we find the right balance between scaring away investors and ensuring that investors come into the economy? I do not see anything in a bill that will scare any investor away. Any economy that guarantees a market capitalization of 30% of the market share to any business, it's enticing enough to any multinational who wants to play in that particular sector, because it already guarantees profits, huge margin, data and voice. It's a growing market. It will continue to expand, especially data, over the next decade at the very least. So it's more than a gold mine. It's more than a huge opportunity for players coming into that sector. So I do not see it as discouraging investments in the economy, but obviously, like you rightfully mentioned, policymakers must always find the right balance between not frustrating capital, inflow into the economy, and protecting the local economy. And I don't think that, beyond 30% market share does that.